Hello there, and welcome back to Inside the Vault, episode 64, a Carolina Panthers podcast. I am your host, Ryan Smith, and my guest today is the host of The Rush on 730 The Drive. Find him in Charlotte, North Carolina. Also, play-by-play for your Charlotte men's and women's basketball on ESPN Plus. And you'll see him all over Charlotte as he's always been. You know him, Mr. Bobby Rosinski. Bobby, how's it going?
Doing well, Ryan. Appreciate you having me on here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just get right into it. I was going to start with Panthers and free agency and everything, but I'll start with the jersey behind you, Sam Mills. We
Yep,
let's
pretty
talk
good.
about Sam. I mean, you can't talk about the Carolina Panthers without talking about Sam Mills and the keep pounding mantra that he inserted with this Carolina Panthers team, 2003 Super Bowl run back in Dan Morgan's era, the current general manager of the Panthers, but a player back in those days. What did Sam Mills mean to the Carolina Panther organization? And were you fortunate enough to kind of be in his presence? And would you take away? What did you take away from him in his life that he lived so well?
Yeah, I mean, I did have the opportunity, obviously, to meet him with my dad being the voice of the Panthers there at the start. That's where that jersey came from. It was actually a game
Right.
worn.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
He autographed it and stuff, so it was probably one of the coolest things that I have. And you talk about what he means to the franchise, and you go back to that 2003 season and going to the Super Bowl, and there he is when he's battling cancer. And I work with Al Wallace every day, who was on that Super
Yep.
Bowl team in
Friend of the show. Yep.
2003.
Yep.
Yeah, and Sam Mills going through everything that he's going through, but not leading on to it, and that's what the keep pounding mantras meant. And I think that phrase has meant so much for this franchise since Sam Mills left us. And I think of guys like Thomas Davis with three torn ACLs and continuing to fight to go out there with Luke Kuechly and those guys, probably Greg Olson. You can go on and on of what this Panther football team and what that phrase has meant. I don't know if you can go across sports a lot, right? Where you find one guy and he didn't even play here that long, right? I mean, it was
Right.
three seasons,
Exactly.
I think, for Sam Mills, 95 through 97. It's kind of in the later stages of his career, but still, he has, the first probably memorable play in franchise history with the pick six against Bubby Brister down in Clemson, and then you had the interception against the Cowboys in the playoffs. So, I mean, he had such an impact, and I also think what stands out, Ryan, is the position he played, linebacker. If you're going to
Yeah.
talk Panther football of what 30 years now, best position that this franchise has ever had is linebacker, and it started with Sam Mills, and you got Kevin Green. Lamar Lathan, Michael Barrow was in there. Then you go to the '03 with Dan Morgan, Will Weatherspoon, then on to TD, John Beeson, Luke. I mean, it's
All the
it's
way down the line.
incredible. And it starts with Sam Mills. So he is to me, it'll always be the heart and soul of this franchise. And all you have to do is look at him. I think if you're any Panther player and you look at his statue, whether it's outside the stadium or I'm sure pictures inside, and think, man, if I can be like Sam Mills, then you're leading a pretty good life.
Yeah, exactly. Let's go into the Carolina Panthers of 2024 and kind of what they did this offseason of free agency as we're kind of winding down in free agency and focusing more on the draft, and we'll get to the draft. The biggest additions, Bobby Brown III coming over from the Los Angeles Rams, Trevon Morningwig from the Vegas Raiders to play safety, and then Turk Wharton, I like to call him, from Kansas City on that defensive line. Some people considered him an overpay, but personally, I did not because he's going to play next to Derek Brown. Not
Yeah.
quite Chris Jones. We know that, but Chris Jones is or Derek Brown rather still pretty good. Um, Biggest losses you could argue probably was Xavier Woods, maybe, and then
Yeah.
Johnny Hecker. Those are probably the two biggest losses if you're going to count a loss from the team. Maybe Shaq Thompson for his leadership. I'm not sure. So kind of your all-encompassing takeaways of the free agency market, the players we signed and the players that we lost, and we'll start there.
Yeah, you go to the players you lost, and I think part of that you can look at guys that have been signed, right? I don't think there's been much happening. Xavier Woods, I do believe, went to what, Tennessee, I think where he
Johnny
ended
Hecker
up.
and Xavier both went to
Yeah,
Tennessee. Yeah.
and Hecker goes there as well. Sam Martin comes here, obviously App State grad, and
Correct.
seeing him in college as well. Now he didn't have to punt a lot with the Bills, so we'll see coming here to the Panthers if there's a little bit more work that he has to do with this team. But I don't think of what they lost is all that big of a deal. Xavier Woods seemed like he was a good t player. It's funny, he was here 3 years. I don't know if many people would realize that he was here that long, and that's not all
I thought
his
he was here
fault.
longer, to be quite honest with you.
Playing in the back end of the defense, which has not been good. It couldn't have been easy for Xavier Woods. So the players they lost, I don't have any issue with that. Shaq Thompson, I get the leadership part of it, but in the end, you're talking about a guy with the injuries that he's gone through. It was the right move for the Carolina Panthers to move on from Shaq, and the moves that they brought in. Wharton, you like. I'm a little bit hesitant, I think, on the pay, but we'll see what he can do here. The Derek Brown point makes sense. Bobby Brown was my favorite on the defensive side. Just a guy who's 24. I think he turns 25 maybe during training camp. You look at what he did with the Rams, and that's just such a good young defense. And I know Avero's ties with that. And obviously, we're bringing some Ram guys, starting with Ashawn Robinson from last year, bringing in to this
Correct.
football team. But that's where you're kind of build it up. And I like Dan Morgan. Last year, you can't fix everything at once. It is
No.
a process. And last year was the offensive line, and this year he's going to the defensive line. I remember talking with Marty Herney before, and he goes, "What's the most important thing?" He goes, "The football," and then it's the people that are closest to it. So for what the Panthers are doing here, and you can go to the two Super Bowl teams that this had, especially '03. It was a really good O line. It was a really good D line. Super Bowl, if anyone watched it this year, the Philadelphia Eagles is a prime example, and the Chiefs O line wasn't that good, and it cost them. So I think
Yeah.
the Panthers building the team the right way. So Bobby Brown, and to me, was my favorite. Cost plays a part in that too. 3 years, $21 million, nothing crazy, and a guy that was really good against the run. So they've done a good job just splashing it all around the defense to improve a unit that we all know can't hopefully get worse, right? So I mean, a defense is going to get better, and I'll just say offensively, Rico Dowdle, I was floored when I saw him signed, and maybe it was just
Excellent
last year
move.
with the Cowboys and what he did against us. But hey, 1,000 yards last year. You swap him out with Miles Sanders going to Dallas, Rico in. I love that 1-2 punch with Hubbard and Dallas.
Yeah, that was a very underrated move. It's the other free agent that I'm blanking on his name right now, but the Minnesota ex-Minnesota defensive end Pat, I think Pat something.
Yeah, there's so many signings, it's hard to keep track of
Yeah,
everything.
but it seems
That's
like we
still
like
bad.
to sign Minnesota defensive ends. I mean, we had
Matt Jones.
DJ Wanham, Stephen Weatherly, I think was a past one, and obviously now with Pat, and I cannot remember
Yeah,
his name.
Pat Jones.
Pat Jones, yes, thank you. I actually like him. I think he's a very underrated signing. He's not going to be the flashiest player in the world, but he had 7.5 sacks last year for the Vikings as a non-starter, and you feel like he could come in and be a role player for this team and just either provide depth at the end of the day. You mentioned Avero, and I think let's be honest, they gave up the most points in franchise history last year. So I think people are going to give him a little bit of, finger pointing on that end. But where do you stand, Bobby? Because I feel like there's two camps, right? There's the Avero didn't have the players that he wanted last year. Derek Brown goes down. Shaq Thompson goes down. That's one end of the spectrum. Injuries cost the Panthers so many points in so many games last year. And then on the other hand, it's like, yeah, well, this is the NFL. You need to be able to
Yeah.
replace players when they come down. It's next man up. And you don't just get to say, oh, I had injury. So where do you stand on Ajero Avero and kind of his year three in Charlotte coming up this year and how pivotal this is for him?
No, I mean, you laid it out perfectly. It's whichever side you want to go with. I'll be honest with you. I was surprised they kept him around just because it had been 2 years. Dave Canales came in. It was his first year. Like a Robert Sala was out there that had a connection with Dave Canales. You just thought if there was a time to make the move, why not do it now? That
Right.
you're comfortable with Canales. You liked how he went about the season. You got Dan Morgan going into year two. You're retooling the defense. So this was an easy time to do it. It didn't happen. Look, Avero, we know, has gotten head coaching interviews in the past, so he's a guy well liked, and that's another reason me personally, I would have moved on.
Mhm.
And it's Avero is so well liked. So let's say he goes out and he does turn around the defense this year. Is he then gone the season after that, and his coaching staff is going with him, and he's off somewhere else, and then all of a sudden we're going back to year one. But you can go back to what Bill Parcells that if you want me to, cook the dinner, I got to shop for the groceries. Well, let's face it, the groceries weren't very good for the Carolina
Right.
Panthers. And when you take Derek Brown out, it was such a massive hole that you had up front here. So I'm not going to blame Avero, but I also understand fans that get frustrated because you made the point. coaches are supposed to make players better, right? Whether I don't care who it is, you want to see that second defensive tackle step in and get better. And Mike Jackson's an example of a guy though at corner that none of us really knew who he was. He comes in right there before the start of the season as they revamped the corner position, and he had a pretty good season. Obviously, he got rewarded for that here to stick around with
Resigned.
J.C.
Yep.
Horn.
Yep. Yep.
So I
Um,
mean, with Navarro, it's hit or miss, but I could go either way. If he wasn't here anymore, I wouldn't. It wouldn't bother me.
yeah. Derek Brown signed his extension last year. Unfortunately, he did get hurt. Obviously, as we mentioned last year, we all know how that occurred. J.C. Horn signs his extension this offseason. It lasted about a week's time of being the highest paid corner in the NFL, and then Derek Stingley decided to re-up him this week. But not talking about Derek Stingley. With J.C. Horn, that clearly had to happen. We all know that. A very good player for the Carolina Panthers. He just has to stay healthy. He proved that he could do that this year. I am of the belief, and this is not just because I'm a Panthers podcast host and also a past fan, or I should say current fan as well. Um, I think J.C. Horn can be a top five corner when healthy. I don't think people give him the credit that he deserves. I think he's seen as like you got the Pat Surtains, the Sauce Gardners, the Derek Steenleys, and then J.C. Horn is somewhere, down here. So how important was that signing for the team, and will he be able to uphold his end of the bargain going forward?
Yeah, you're a lot more with Al Wallace on the J.C. Horn side of things of the belief. Look, I get, as you said, paying him, I understood what the Panthers needed to do. He's the best player on this defense outside of Derek Brown. Is he top five? In my opinion, no. And there's one thing that I need to see besides health, and that's interceptions. He had one last year. It happened to be in
Yep.
week two against
Well,
Justin
if you
Herbert
don't
and
get
the
thrown the
Los
ball,
Angeles.
you
It,
get
it got through the
intercepted.
ball enough though. They're like there was enough there. I understand that argument, and you go to the D line's not very good, right? That makes life very
Yeah,
hard
yeah,
as a corner. We were arguing about this on the show the other day because Al actually had J.C. Horn as his number one move, best move that Dan Morgan made this offseason. And Mark Yarborough, I know you've talked with before, like we were on the other side of that. Like I don't know if it's the best move, but for JC, you got Mike Evans in this division, right? Like, all right, I want to see JC traveling around with that. And that's been a topic of conversation
And I was
with
going
the
to say
team in the
that's the
past.
number one topic I think with Avero's
Yeah.
defense this year is people want to see JC travel against Mike Evans, against Drake London, against Chris Olave in this division.
Because I mean, for those teams, it makes it easier to game plan if you know J.C. Horn's going to stay on one side of the field. And Mike Jackson, this isn't a knock on him. I think he had a decent year, obviously way better than what Dane Jackson was, which is why he's no
He's
longer on
no
this
longer,
football team.
yeah, he's back in Buffalo.
Yeah, you gotta figure out a way that J.C. Horn is a threat that, to me, if I'm an opposing offensive coordinator and I'm game planning for the Panthers, like, man, I got to figure out a way that we're setting guys in motion, whatever it may be. I don't know if you have to do that right now against the Panthers. So Horn, could it be worth it? Look, when he signed that deal, I think I tweeted at the time, you knew it wasn't going to be long. He was going to be the
No.
highest paid corner, and it's the same. I mean, Max Crosby was the highest paid DN for what, like 5 days, I think, until
Yeah, and then Miles
Garrett
Garrett
got it.
decided to call his bluff and stay in Cleveland. Yeah.
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 So everyone gets those money, man, and it goes forward. I hope he stays healthy. If he's healthy, look, he's at least a top 10-ish corner, right? And with
Right.
the way the money is in the salary cap, that can work for the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah. Um, Real quick, when it comes to the Carolina Panthers, specifically with um on defense, do you feel like, or I'm sorry, not defense, the offensive side of the ball. The other player that we weren't talking about that people feel like is such a, and I'm being sarcasm here, just such a big loss is, Ian Thomas. He's been such a liability for this team. So I think a lot of people are very good to see him go at the end of the day. But no, you mentioned earlier offensive and defensive lines, the Super Bowl with Philadelphia, and then the past Panthers teams, especially the '03 and '15 Super Bowl teams that had those offensive and defensive line in the trenches. Would you agree, mentioning old friend Dave Gettleman here, he was very good at drafting hog mollies was his term in
Yeah.
the trenches. And it feels like the Panthers kind of got away from that before Canales and Morgan were hired in their current roles. And now we're finally getting back to that mentality of you got to build from the trenches out.
Yeah, and look, I look at that offensive line right now and give credit to Dan Morgan last year. Did he overpay for Robert Hunt? I think in terms of what people thought he was going to get, yeah. But you also have to do that if you're the Carolina Panthers. You got to build this up, make it a
The 2
winning
and
team.
15 tax, as I say.
Yeah, you got to make guys want to come here. And Robert Hunt, he did that. Hunt was is everything. He was a bargain in the end to me for what he brought this team. Damian Lewis at left guard. I thought the center position last year, I had no issues with Austin Corbett being the center. He goes down. Brady Christensen was fine. Cade Mays then steps in. He was fine. Obviously, Taylor Moton is the unsung hero, if you want to say, for the Panthers. I mean, that guy's out there every single week and does his job to perfection. Left tackle, maybe that one's a little bit more up in the air, but that wasn't as much of a topic last year
I'm gonna say
because
Icky did fine last year.
yeah,
Yeah.
and part of that is the four guys next to him were so much better. So you
Correct.
have belief of who your guard is with Damian Lewis next to you. That makes life easier for you. I was stunned too, by the way, that Brady Christensen is back here. I mean, the
You
fact
literally
that
had my next question. You must have seen my notes here. Talk about that. Why was he not? Why is he? Why? Why did he not get signed for starter money
no,
elsewhere?
I thought, with Austin Corbett, you kind of had a feeling he was going to be back. Cade Mays, restricted free agent. You knew he was going to be back. And I was like, well, if I was Brady Christensen, why would I want to stay around here anymore and be a part of, I want to go an opportunity to be a starter somewhere. And I am floored that no team offered him some contract to be a starting guard in this league. We know Matt Rule thinks his arm's too short to be a tackle. I think he stepped in and he played there and he played center fine. I mean, if I'm a team, that's a guy, even if he's my sixth man, I would want that guy to be on my football team that I could throw him in anywhere.
Let me throw a theory at you. Do you think the Panthers see him as the Taylor Moton replacement in the next year or two?
It's an interesting one. For Taylor, I'm not going to run him out anytime soon.
Oh, no,
I
no,
would like
no,
to.
no, 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 no. If for whatever reason his play were to decline, or if he were to suddenly just retire while he's kind of on top a little bit, maybe they see him as someone who can. I mean, Dave's talked about it. Dave Canales has talked about how he can be very versatile across the line. He's played everything but left tackle at this.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think he could be, a replacement down the line for anybody on the O line, be a
No,
starter.
that's why it's key to just have him here because any injury, you're lucky for I think for any team if you have your same starting five the majority of the season. That's usually a good sign, right? You go to the Panther 2015 offensive line. That wasn't a great offensive line with Mike Remmers at right tackle, Michael Lohr at left tackle, but they started every single game together. And the importance of those guys being together, I know the next year the Atlanta Falcons were the same exact thing. It was the same starting five all year long. So for the Panthers to say you can just slide in Brady Christensen to whether that's filling in for Damian Lewis for a game, filling in for one of the tackles for a game, it's great. And I don't know what the market was out there. And maybe Dan Morgan, I have to ask Dan, like, was he shocked? Like, oh, you can actually come back here and play for us for not that much money? Because right now you feel like you have what, seven offensive linemen that
At
you
least, yeah,
feel comfortable with. And Brady is that swing guy that you can put out at tackle. I don't know if I want him out there for 6 games. We haven't really seen that to have
sure.
that much faith in it, but at least if you got to go out there for a game or two, I think that'd be fine for the Panthers.
Let's switch gears now for the last or our remaining time with the draft coming up in April, about a month's time from now, just over a month's time. Okay, so we can go down the soliloquy of needs that the Panthers have. Another defensive end, another receiver, another tight end, um, probably another, at least a couple linebackers, a safety, and then maybe a kicker in the seventh round. Who knows? Let me just throw something out. People talk about, Jalen Walker, Mikael Williams. Those are some of the people we've seen. Tech McMillan. Steve Smith has got his opinion on Tech McMillan, if you didn't see that the other day. Um, okay. Do you think in the if you've followed any of my shows or if you've seen any of my podcasts with past guests, I say the same thing to every person. So I'm going to say it to you. I am a fan of Mason Graham. And if Mason Graham is there at pick 8, I don't care if the Panthers have spent money on Turk Wharton, on Bobby Brown III. You are not in a position to not take the best player available. And if Mason Graham is there at pick 8, I would run the card to the podium if I am Dan Morgan and Dave Canales. Now, do I think he's going to be there at 8? Probably not. I think Jacksonville's going to take him at 5. But if he is not there, or if he is there at 8, I would run the card to the podium. Do you think something like that is feasible for the Panthers with Mason Graham?
It's funny. We legit talked about that exact scenario today on the show. And part of that is you got this all of a sudden Jackson Dart love that's coming out there. I know some
Yeah.
mocks yesterday had him sitting there at number nine, which then does that lead to something going earlier, which is the dream scenario for the Panthers
Oh,
overall, right? If
definitely.
you can get three quarterbacks going to the top eight. I am more of the other side that, hey, they've gone out and spent money at the defensive tackle position, and we need more of the edge rushers. And that's where you
Sure.
look. Walker, to me, is the guy that has stood out the most. I mean, Abdul Carter would be the pipe dream. Unfortunately, he
Of
was
course,
only
he's
so
not going to
good
be
in the
there. Probably not.
playoffs, and
Nope.
yeah, that changed everything. So he's out the door. So, and I said this on the show. I'm not going to sit there and scream at it, right? Like I'm not going to go in the next day and yell at Dan Morgan for drafting Mason Graham. That's up to Avera, right? You got to figure out what you're going to do here. Mason
Sure.
Graham can be the guy that's going to be the next, Chris Jenkins, KK Shorts, Star Lotulelei, whatever defensive tackle for the Panthers in the past you want to throw out, and he can be that foundation piece alongside Derek Brown. That you have those guys, and then you deal with what you got, and that's the one good thing about free agency with what Dan did. I mean, the biggest deal we're talking about with Wharton was what, 3 years, $45
Correct.
million. And
Yep.
in real money, I mean, that's what, a 2 year probably deal. And then you can get out of it. So there's nothing that Dan Morgan has done here in the offseason that is some 5, 6 year deal that has you locked in for so long. So Mason Graham, he wouldn't be at the top of my list, but also he's not going to be far down on it because McMillan, I don't know if I want to go wide receiver, especially after what we just did with XL a season ago. I like Tyler Warren personally, but
I
I
think
just
eight's a little rich for a tight end. If you, personally, he's not
no,
Brock
and I hear
Bowers.
that. And I don't know whether they'd use him or not because I didn't see JT Sanders get used enough last year because I still think JT can actually be a pretty good tight end if they give him the opportunity. I thought he was going pretty good, and then he had the scary injury against Kansas City,
Yep.
and then it just felt like after that we didn't get to see JT that much. But I just at number eight, I do think the Panthers are in a great spot, and when two quarterbacks are going to be gone. Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter. So I mean, that's four of the spots. There's the offensive tackle. I don't have his name in front of me, but that's not something the Panthers are going to do.
Right.
So where you mentioned these names, I mean, there's a lot of opportunity, I think, here for the Panthers.
So to be clear, between Jalen Walker and Mikael Williams, you are a Jalen Walker fan.
I'm Walker, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm
That's where
assuming
I
you.
would personally go right now if I was the Panthers. I
Okay.
just want sacks.
And I'm assuming you've seen also a friend of the program, Joe Person from The Athletic. His latest article says that the Panthers are enamored with Mikael Williams. Have you seen that?
I have not seen that one from Joe, but obviously Joe always has the inside information on everything. So, Williams to me, I don't know if the numbers I loved as much, but let's go to the
I think
Philadelphia
you're
Eagles,
going off
right?
traits more than production and the upside.
Yeah, and I don't love that.
Trayvon Walker from the Jaguars is a name that comes
Yeah,
to mind from the past
and
few years.
to go former Panthers with Al, I do the show with Brenson Buckner, who was his teammate, was with Jacksonville on the D line coach when they drafted Walker, and he no longer has a job as a defensive line coach down in Jacksonville. So, I upside, maybe it's too much Hornets pass for me of drafting a guy with upside. That
Yeah.
scares me. I'd
Yeah.
rather have guy that has somewhat production throughout his. DJ Johnson's a guy, to be honest with you. I
I
thought
think
they drafted
I think he's in
because they
trouble.
thought they could develop it into something.
Yeah. Yeah. What about safety? I think trading back, I think from eight is the scenario here for a safety. But, whether it's South Carolina safety Nick Emanwari, who has said publicly he would like to come play with the Gamecock feed on the Panthers here, or Malachi Starks from Georgia, who is my preference personally. Either of those guys would be not quite maybe Kyle Hamilton, but a nice in the box run stuffing safety for the Panthers ball hawker over the middle. But again, safety at eight, I'm not really kind of I don't really like that. I'd rather trade back to get a safety at eight. But that's something I wouldn't consider, I wouldn't rule out as well.
No, I'm okay trading back. I guess the question is how far are you willing to trade back? Because I know the second round,
Correct. Yeah.
Panthers late second round pick. So if you can somehow get something early in the second round to go a part of with that, I would be okay. I don't think that's far though. Like to me, that's 12th, 11th, 12th is probably as
Yeah,
far
not bad.
back.
Yeah, you shouldn't be that far. Yeah.
So then, for Carolina safety, I'm not opposed to that either here. And it's just it's the one thing with where this roster is, it's best player available, right? That could be tight end, that could be wide receiver, it could be D tackle, it could be pass rush, and linebacker. It's not like they're set at that position here as they move
I was going to say
forward.
the third player I was going to mention was Jihad Campbell from Alabama, the linebacker. I've heard rumblings maybe he could be the pick at 8-8, and you would just go with that stud linebacker to kind of reset the room,
Yeah.
like they did with Kuechly at one time, John Beeson, Thomas Davis, and the like.
Yeah, no, and that's where any area I think Dan Morgan, and we can go to Dan here, right? This
Yeah,
draft
let's
class.
talk about it. Yeah, What do you think of this Canales Morgan era here so far, going into year three together?
Yeah, and last year, I like Dave Canales. I
Or year
don't know
two, year
anyone.
two. Yeah,
Yeah,
year
year
two.
two, I don't know anyone that's not feeling great about Dave, how he handled everything last year from the start. Benching Bryce Young when he did, that took a lot of guts,
It took
right?
balls.
To,
It
to
took
do
balls.
that. And whatever crazy car accident that injured the thumb of Andy Dalton that took him out, it's going to be a 30 for 30 one day, maybe, if Bryce Young continues on the path that he's on right now. But I love Dave Canales. I think he's doing a heck of a job. For Dan Morgan, it's been hit and miss. And look, it's a guy that I think in free agency last year, you feel pretty good about. He had a couple misses. Dane Jackson, we touched on earlier. It was not a great year for Dane. A player I actually loved when they signed him last year was Jordan Fuller, and he ended up being a disaster, right? Didn't even get on the field at the end of the season for this team. And then the draft was hit or miss. XL, I think that's up in the air right now. Jonathan Brooks, unfortunately, with the injury. JT's the guy I'd love to see more of. So it's hit or miss, I think, with Dan Morgan right now. But that's what makes this year so key. And they have a lot of draft picks, and it starts with pick number 8. You got so many players to pick from here, but Dan's got to get it right. I don't care what player it is in the end. It's just got to be someone that we're talking about. For Marty Herney, a lot of people would be critical of his drafts. What's the one thing he always did? He usually nailed the first round pick, and that player was a foundational piece for this team. And go back over the recent drafts, that's not been the case for this football team. You got to hit those first round picks so that they are the anchors of the franchise.
And to go up yep, beyond further, a team like San Francisco, which till recently anyway, Philadelphia and Kansas City, among others, the reason they're so good every year is not just because there's the Patrick Mahomes of the world and the Jalen Hurtses of the world and whoever you want to insert your in there. But they nail their fourth, fifth, sixth
Yeah.
round draft picks and they get that depth. And this roster for the Panthers was just so top heavy the last few years. There was no depth outside of some of the starters at the key positions. So a guy like Derek Brown going down this past year was the worst case scenario for the
Yeah.
team because there was zero depth there.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean that's what the Panthers need to start doing is hitting on these draft picks in the fourth, fifth, sixth, the later rounds. And I had the number recently, and it's not in front of me at this moment, but I think from like 2018 to 2024 draft, something along those lines. I think we had like 40 players selected, and I think like 26 of those are out the door. So like it's just no longer here. So it's like the majority of those draft picks are gone, and that's unacceptable.
Yeah.
You have
No,
to.
I mean, free agency is supposed to be, in my mind, you fill out your team, but it's the draft that you build the foundation and create it all. And we're talking about wide receiver, whether you draft it. Well, Terrence Marshall, Jonathan Mingo. Hopefully, XL doesn't go down that path, but you don't
By,
really
by
have
the
the
way, by
benefit.
the way, isn't it crazy that Debo Samuel was traded for a
Yeah.
lesser round pick than Jonathan Mingo?
That was maybe the best that Dan Morgan's ever done is somehow got the Dallas Cowboys to
It's
give up
Jerry
a
Jones.
fourth
Let's be
round
quite
pick.
honest. It's
Yeah, it is, but you'll take it if you're the Panthers. But the whole
yes, you
point
will.
there is you're saying, yeah, it's the draft. You have to get it. To me, let's say you have one pick each round, 7. If you can get 3 guys, right? 3 guys that are you think can be a part of this football team for the next 6, 7, 8, 9 years, that's going to set you up to be such a good football team and be where this team was for that stretch there with Cam Newton, Luke Kuechly, Greg Olsen leading the way.
Yeah. Well, Bobby Rosinski has been my guest today here on Inside the Vault. As we wind down, Bobby, I'm going to give you just some rapid fire to close out here, and I'll get a bold prediction from you, and I'll get you out the door. So I'll just give you just some rapid fire questions. You just tell me first thing that pops into your mind. Okay. Um, First pick on number 8 in the draft this year. We'll assume there's no trade back. Is that going to be offense or defense?
I'm gonna go defense, even though I feel like Al's been pushing me offense lately, but I hope that doesn't happen.
Will the Panthers draft a kicker in this draft?
No, we'll go with Matthew Wright.
Okay. I see. I like the kid from Miami personally.
Yeah, he's not bad.
Andre Borregales. I think I'm pronouncing his name, but anyway, yeah, we'll see. Darren Bates worked him out at the Shrine Bowl. He was with him for most of that time. There's a lot of story there, and
Yeah.
anyway, okay, that's good. We have different views on that one. Who is going to be the most improved player for the Panthers in 2025?
I hope it's JT Sanders. I hope, and we don't know how the rest of the tight end room, because right now it's just the two main guys, right? It's JT and it's Tommy Tremble who's back with this team. I want JT to get that opportunity, be the number one tight end. I think he flashed when he had that opportunity, but give me JT. I think he can really blossom if he's given the opportunity to be the number one tight end.
Bryce Young will start and play for we'll say the majority of the 17 games this season and lead the Panthers to a potential wild card berth in the NFC this year. I'm not saying win the NFC South, I'm saying compete for that 7th seed, that wild card berth in the NFC.
I think it's possible. To me, the dream of the whole season is we're talking about middle December, Christmas time, and you're gearing up for a Sunday football game that means something for the
Mhm.
Panthers. And we're
Yeah.
not looking draft or anything like that. I think Bryce has quieted everything right. You're going into this offseason feeling so much better about him than where you were one season ago. And I think Bryce is going to have a really good season. And that's even if the wide receivers stay as they are, because I think he has a good connection with those guys.
Yeah. All right. Um, do you think after well, I'll save that one next. Um, the biggest position of need in this draft when it comes to they have to come out of this draft with one or even multiple players, what position would that be?
That's tough. I'm gonna say pass rusher is we talked about Jones, who they signed from Minnesota. I like Wanham. It was unfortunate the health situation that kept him out a
Yeah,
lot last year. Clowney's on the back end, but we need someone that we're going to be sitting there saying that's going to be our leader rushing the passer for the years to come. And right now, you just kind of have more of a collection of guys, and not that that's a bad group, but it's not giving you to me the future that we were talking about of who are going to be these guys we're talking about 6, 7 years down the road.
all right, last two. Christian McCaffrey will be available and playing against the Carolina Panthers in San Francisco in 2025. Yes or no?
I'll say yes. Last year he that was his injury year. He missed all that year. I think he's either had a kid yet or his wife's pregnant and going to have one soon. So he's going to be ready to go. Christian McCaffrey will be playing football this year.
Okay. Is it going to be an ice up sun game like Steve Smith against the Baltimore Ravens?
I don't think CMC will have that type of anger like Steve Smith did back in the
Okay, okay. It sounds like you have some inside sourcing on there, so I'll trust you on
day.
that. All right, we'll leave you with this. What is your bold prediction for this 2025 Panthers team? And it doesn't have to be record or how many wins, or it can just be, it can be a player, it can be a coach, it can be literally anything. It doesn't have to be specific to the team.
I'll say Bryce Young is a Pro Bowl quarterback in 2025. Now, Pro Bowl, obviously, more guys get into it these days with the games and stuff, but I think he puts together a just strong season that any doubt about Bryce Young is completely out the door here. And everyone's going to be feeling really good about this quarterback moving forward.
Yeah. I would be remiss if I didn't mention, and it is not really a question, more of a statement on my end. David Tepper, who I thought this season finally kind of took a step back, if you will. It is
Yeah.
finally we're reaping the benefits of that this year. I think he finally kind of learned that the the NFL team he owns is not a stock, and you can't just
Yeah.
dilute the stock when you're done with it. You have to grow some patience and know that Rome is not built in a day, like to use Matt Rule's phrase. I think he talked about Jay-Z though, not Rome.
Yeah. 7 years, I think, is what he's talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, that's a whole nother ball of wax. But Anyway, anyway, so that was just my thought on David Tepper. It's just it makes a difference being back in the background and letting the football people do the football stuff.
No, it's been the thing you wanted all along here. David Tepper, you hire guys to do their job, let them do their job, right? And for Dan Morgan, I think he allowed that to happen. Dave Canales as well. I mean, the last thing I can think of Tepper was probably the restaurant here in Charlotte
Yep,
where he took the
Dilworth. Yep.
guy's hat, he took the guy's hat off, but which was around draft time, if I'm not mistaken, right? So maybe
Yep.
we have to gear up for that in case Tepper's driving in and he sees that sign. But well, let's talk bad teams, right? It's the Dallas Cowboys. Now, their owner is also the GM of the team. You go to Daniel Snyder all those years with the Commanders. Owners do not need to be involved because you met, stock market or housing, whatever all these guys do in making their money, you can make a second decision and just flip things. That's not how sports work. Sports takes a lot of time. It takes patience. It takes hiring the right people. And I think we all are hoping David Tepper finally learned that. Everyone will love you, David. Just win football games. You don't have to be the one making the calls. Just win. I don't know if anyone knows what the Chiefs owners are doing or the Eagles owners as much. Just win football games and everyone will love you.
I think the worst thing about Clark Hunt in Kansas City is those NFL Player Association surveys. I think he got
Yeah,
rated a D
but
something.
he'll take those Lombardi trophies.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, Bobby, thank you so much for coming on Inside the Vault. Before we let you go, tell us about your show on the radio. Any other things that you have coming up, projects, things you want to kind of.
Yeah, no, I mean, do the afternoon rush, 2 to 6 each weekday afternoon on 7:30 The Game, 97.5 FM in Charlotte. Mark Yarborough, and then former Panther Al Wallace is a part of the show. So we have a pretty good time. Usually Al has bad takes that I have to call him out on. So we have a good time with that. Do Charlotte 49ers stuff. That just came to an end for the season with basketball wrapping up here.
Oh yeah.
So some time before football season kicks off with Charlotte. Got a new head coach. They just started spring practice this week, actually. So hopefully things will be looking up. Next, they actually start the year in Bank of America Stadium against App State at the end of August this year.
I will be looking to go to that UNC game against Bill Belichick down in Charlotte.
Yeah, that will
As
be
an
a
alum of UNC Charlotte, I think a lot of people are going to try to flock to that game for sure.
oh yeah, no, that will be a hot ticket. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. Well, Matt, well, Bobby, is there any other things that you wanted to kind of leave our listeners with as I head you out the door? Anything that I didn't bring up that you wanted to just leave our Panther fans with positivity and momentum going into the draft and kind of 2025 season?
I think positivity and momentum is the big thing, right? For many years, we go back, what last playoff game was against the Saints, I want to say, where Devin Funchess should have caught the deep ball from Cam Newton and didn't catch it. And it's been a rough go since then. But I feel like for the first time outside of maybe that end with Steve Wilkes as the interim head coach,
Yeah.
that you feel good about where this organization's going. I hope the fans look next year, would be in the playoffs, great. That'd be awesome. Is that gonna happen? I don't know. I mean, the Bucks are still good. They signed Hassan Reddick. I think they've had a good offseason. The Falcons, we'll see what happens with Michael Penix, but Carolina's gonna improve again. And whether that's 7, 8 wins, this team is finally on the direction where you want sustained success. And that is a process. We can go to Matt Rule, Jay-Z, 7 years. It is a process. But as long as David Tepper is allowing that process to play out, I think Dan Morgan has proven he can be the guy, and I 100% believe Dave Canales can be the guy, and that's exciting. And you got a quarterback. You got a quarterback, you give yourself a chance to win games, and that gives hope here that the Carolina Panthers are going to be back to being a talked about football team again in a positive way.
Well, that's a good place to end it. Bobby Rosinski here on Inside the Vault, episode 64. Thank you so much for coming on the show, sir, and we will talk to you down the line.
Sounds good, Ryan. Thank you very much.
And that'll wrap up episode 64 of Inside the Vault. Rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and we will